Us this afternoon for this latest in the Sustain IQ webinar series. If you don't mind, we're going to just give everyone an extra 1 or 2 minutes just to join. We've a lot of people coming in here, so we'll kick off in about 2 minutes. In the meantime, I think we're going to just throw a quick poll up on screen just to kind of get an idea where you guys are at with regards AI. In the business at the minute. So yep, and just the next couple of minutes, we'll let people join. If you guys can answer that poll, and we'll get going in a couple of seconds. Thank you. Okay, folks, we'll be starting very, very shortly. Again, just a wee reminder to complete the poll on screen at the minute, and we'll kick things off in about a minute. Thank you. Okay, everyone, welcome and good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for our latest webinar. Today, we are going to explore the topic of why data is your most important ESG asset and AI enabler. Thank you for completing that little poll on screen. It's very interesting, actually. Are you using any AI tools in your organization other than ChatGPT, Copilot, etc.? So we're sitting at around 60% yes, 40% no. It's kind of shifting there. So it's close to half and half, really, which is really, really interesting. And I think it's a good question to start with because we're really going to dive into this whole AI and ESG conversation now. At the minute, let me just clear that off my screen. Perfect. So, folks, we've got about 40 minutes today to discuss this topic. So, look, if you have any questions, please, if you could just add them to the chat. PJ will be looking after the questions in the chat room, so we can get to a Q&A after the webinar. So, I think for now, let's just get started. We actually touched on AI in a previous webinar, I think maybe this time last year, and it generated so much interest. And back then, we explored how AI was going to impact ESG, and it was just a really interesting topic. So we did want to bring it back now in 26 and kind of dive a little bit deeper into it. So I'm delighted to welcome Suzanne Hill along today, who's joining us. Suzanne is the founder of AI for SMEs and also founder of Constructive Intelligence. Suzanne, you did join us on the previous webinar, and I think you're the reason we whipped up a right old storm. So look, we're delighted to have you back. Would you mind, Suzanne, just very briefly giving people a little bit of a brief intro to yourself and your businesses?
Yeah, so I am the founder of AI for SMEs and more recently Constructive Intelligence, which is an advisory practice for the construction sector in AI. I describe myself as a business strategist for AI because I'm dealing with the business elements, not with the technology strategy. So as anybody that's heard me speak before, they'll know that my bugbear is that people over focus on the technology and not enough on the rest of the business that goes around making the technology successful. So yeah, that's my focus. I have worked in the construction sector for almost 30 years. So yes, so I suppose really providing a bridge between construction and the world of AI and making it make sense for non-technical people.
I think that's where we're at. I think it's the making sense of it all at the minute where there's a real sort of demand. So no, brilliant, Suzanne. Thank you for that. Delighted to have you with us here today. Looking forward to having the conversation. Very briefly, folks, just a recap. My name's Liam McEvoy. I'm one of the co-founders of Sustain IQ. And Sustain IQ is a software solution. So we make it easy for our customers to capture their ESG data across their business, across their projects, bringing it all into one big central dashboard. We're investing heavily in AI, and while we're never going to be like an AI tool, we do see ourselves as an AI enabler. And so this month, for example, we're launching an AI document scanner, which is really going to help our customers capture a lot of that data from dockets and stuff like that. So look, it's a big focus area for us. And as I say, I'm really, really excited to have this conversation today with you, Suzanne. So I think on that, we'll jump in and get started. And I suppose, Sudan, it's kind of a follow-on from the previous one because the previous one did create a bit of a storm. There's a lot of follow-ups that came out of that. There's a lot of interest in this. And I know we're always coming at everything from an ESG perspective. And we talked about the impact that it was having. But the one thing that I took away from that last session was something that you said. It really resonated with me and I think a lot of the audience. And it was around the role that data plays in this whole process. We kind of just jump to the AI tools. We don't think about what's actually feeding it. And you said something, ESG and AI are converging and data is the bridge. And that companies now need to start to view their data as an asset. And so whenever we're thinking about ESG data, we're thinking about our carbon data sets, our waste management performance, our social value stats, all of that. They're all very, like, how do I say it? Like, it's all very sort of operational from a reporting requirement, be that regulatory or contract or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
possibly not really properly considering it as an asset. So you always talk about the need for this shift in our mindset. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think how data is viewed at the minute will depend on maybe on where you are with your digital transformation journey. But I think that data is nearly treated as an operational byproduct rather than a strategic asset for the company. Um, if when I'm having conversations with companies who are kind of getting started in their AI journey, it usually involves a big focus on the IT department, and I'm trying to explain, look, yes, the technology is important, but it's only about 20% of the picture. The other 80% is to do with organizational transformation. It's putting in place the structures that actually make the AI tools useful. And one of the elements of that is most definitely data. I try to get people to think about it, and I say, look, your data should be treated in the same way as the contents of your bank account. And at the minute, what I see is, the equivalent of someone standing out in the street and throwing, £20 notes around the place.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
there's, I think people have rushed into AI, and one of my mantras around this is rules before tools, rules before tools. It's
yeah.
getting people to understand the value of the data that they're handling and to put adequate governance around that.
And I would think, Suzanne, like what you're talking about there as well is the volume of data that's now required. Like
Yeah,
it's going to be vast. These machines need to be fed.
yeah,
And so yeah, I can imagine, we have a lot of data bouncing around a business more than ever, living in lots of
yeah.
different places, lots of different software. But again, we probably aren't thinking of it as from a strategic perspective. If
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I
uh,
think also, when I'm explaining kind of AI to people who are new to it or just getting started, I use this analogy of a car and I say, imagine you're driving from London to Birmingham, going to Birmingham's your business, that's like your business objective for your destination.
yeah,
And the route that you take to get there is like your strategy or process. The AI tool is like the car, it's an enabler to get you from London to Birmingham. But the most important part of all of that is the driver of the car, because they are deciding what's the destination, what's the strategy. They're getting they're the one that's driving the car. So they're the one that's getting it's their skills as a driver
yeah,
that
yeah.
that gets you to your destination safely. So, the fuel for the car is like your data. So it
Yeah.
needs to be in sufficient quantity and of sufficient quality to power you to your destination.
But
So if your data is messy, it's all over the place, it's not it's not structured, there's no naming conventions, and everybody's kind of inputting data and however they see fit, then it's like the equivalent, I suppose, of putting about a fiver of red diesel in your car and hoping it's going to power you all the way to Birmingham. So it wouldn't even get you to the end of the road at today's prices, I don't think.
I know, I
But
know.
yeah, so so tools like I suppose Sustain IQ that are providing the building blocks of gathering that data in a coherent format, in a usable format, are going to become more and more important because the data is the fuel for the car.
So that's really interesting. I've never heard that analogy before, and I think it's brilliant. It kind of makes sense. I love way analogies like that because it kind of helps me kind of get my head around what it is. Um, and that point you made there, maybe like a second ago about companies rushing into their AI tools. They're focusing too
Mhm.
much on the tool. That's obviously what you mean. Too much focus on the tool, not enough focus on what you're feeding the tool with.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I mean I suppose there's a wider discussion to be had around that in terms of going forward, there's this, people think they're rushing into like implement these AI tools, implement the technology, and there's of course the market is awash with tech companies who tell you that they can build you whatever AI tool you want. But in another 12 months time or maybe 2 years time, it could be less, it could be, I don't think it's going to be any more than that. Everybody's going to have access to the AI tools. You don't build competitive advantage through the technology unless you have something really different. So your competitive advantage, the AI tools just raise the bar for everybody. So how do you build competitive advantage? And this is where organizational transformation is so important. Um, so you have different avenues there. The first one is through your strategy, through your strategy, your revenue streams. At the minute, I think also there's this kind of reductive mindset around AI. What does it replace? What does it replace? And it's totally the wrong mindset. It's what does it make possible that wasn't possible before we had AI? So, what
Yeah.
other services could we provide? What other revenue streams could we have? So that's one way of building competitive advantage. The other way is, or one of the other ways is through your people. Your people are
Mhm.
extremely important, particularly in the wider construction built environment sector where we have such a shortage of skills. AI literacy and making sure that your staff are really AI literate, that they're really fully aware of governance around your data as well, and that your leadership team is also engaged with AI. This is not something that they can delegate to, someone else in the company. You can't make the quality of the decisions that you make and your ability as a leader to make quick decisions, because there's no point having all this real-time data if you're not good at making decisions in the moment. So that kind of quality of leadership and decision making is going to be important as well. And of course, then another element of competitive advantage is your data.
Yeah.
So, and this is where AI kind of transforms the role of data from being just this operational byproduct into a strategic asset, because you're talking about, your methodologies, your pricing strategies, how you build products, or how you execute, your everyday business. And then the fourth element of competitive advantage would be around ethics and trust. And that
Mhm.
consists then, of course, of your governance, but there's also a big behavioral element to that. I was having a discussion with a company there the other day, and we were talking, it was in the round of talking about governance, and I said, look, there are three different types of risk around your data. There's GDPR risk, which GDPR breaches are happening on a daily basis. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Commercial risk, where people don't realize they're uploading all this information into free AI tools, and they don't realize that that information is now public. As soon as you upload that into a free AI tool, it's public. So they're uploading financial statements, commercially sensitive information, and once it's out there, you can't get it back. So, and it's not because people have any, for the most part, not because people have any malicious intent, but it's that they don't understand the nature of governance and the nature of the value of what they're handling. And then the third risk is obviously contractual risk. So your client might have stipulations in their contract that says, that around AI tools and the use of AI tools. So they might stipulate that you're not allowed to use AI tools. So that's end of discussion.
Yeah.
Or you might be working under an NDA. And again, you couldn't use AI tools then. So, I mean, the current situation that companies are sitting in, like say if I look at across the profile of companies that I work with, they're a bit like leaky buckets, because I'm explaining to them, look, the governance around your data. Your employees are uploading that data because they haven't received any training. They're none the wiser. They're uploading it into free AI tools on a daily basis because your AI policy, nobody understands it. It just sits there somewhere in a drawer, and they maybe don't have adequate AI governance frameworks in place.
And so, and so what, because that's really interesting. Again, you're right. There's so many tools out there, and people don't, it's not malicious. People are just accessing them and using them, and they're getting
Mm-hmm.
used to them. It's all kind of a
Mm-hmm.
new thing, and it's sort of helping a lot of us day to day go about our job and what have you. But like what you're talking about there is a complete shift in even behavioral change
So
within an organization.
it is, and this is what you know people are still treating AI as this kind of as something that sits with their IT department, and that could not be further from the truth. And when I'm talking to companies, I'm saying to them, look, this is a much, much bigger issue. When I run AI masterclasses for leadership teams, at the end of it, and everybody reacts the same. They're sitting back and they're saying, we had no idea that this was such a huge subject. So there's not one person that could explain to you everything, because AI touches every single department in your company. And behavioral change is probably one of the biggest elements, I think, because when you're talking about the AI tools, you've got, well, I'll give you an example. Out with that company, they had an NDA in place with their client. One of their employees uploaded everything into Google Notebook LM. And he said, I didn't know. I didn't know that we weren't meant to do that. I didn't realize that because we had an NDA, we weren't supposed to do that. And then he says, but sure, who would know? And and it's this that where companies trip up,
Yeah, yeah,
because where that comes out, the big issue doesn't occur at the time it actually happens. It occurs later on when you have a dispute with your client, or a dispute with one of your subcontractors, or you have an ISO audit. and you're required to provide an audit trail. What AI tools did you use? What information did you upload? What prompts did you use? And you need to be able to produce that. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's then that you find out about it. So, but instilling that behavior in people and educating them. And the worst thing is that the AI tools nearly encourage bad behavior,
Mm, mm, yeah.
and to me, I think a lot of the time you have to push against that to
They make
not
it
let them.
they make it very easy
Yes, yeah,
not
you
to
just
comply. Yeah.
yeah, people take the easy way. In fact, there was a headline there in the paper maybe 2 days ago. It was like with Pinsent Mason's law firm, and some junior solicitor there had used some AI tool for research, hadn't verified the outputs, and sent it to senior counsel, who then sent it on to a judge. And the judge said, I wasn't aware that these changes had taken place in this legislation. And then upon further investigation, it came out in the wash that this was kind of fictitious and didn't exist. So and the thing is that there's a lot of, I don't think people are thinking about data in terms of liability.
Mm,
So take the example of like a construction contractor. You send out, maybe you have a great AI policy in place and a great governance framework, and then you send out an RFQ to your subcontractor that's got commercially sensitive information out. Maybe it's got drawings or designs. And then the first thing your subcontractors do is upload it into a free AI tool. So all of a sudden, then that chain of governance is broken. And then maybe they're not checking the outputs of the AI tool, and they send them back to you, and you accept those as being correct. And you are then assuming the liability for the accuracy of that information. So,
yeah.
I suppose the issue is in construction, we work in this, information ecosystem,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's a lot of places that can go wrong. So I would expect
Huge.
in the next 6 months anyway to see clients starting to stipulate, ask what AI tools are in place, give a copy of your AI policy in the same way they would ask for some of your other policies, and what governance framework do you have in place,
Because
and that you would have.
that's
Yeah.
sorry, Suzanne, but
No, no.
that's the biggie there. Because look, see, as you're talking there, like I'm thinking always ESG data, and companies
Hmm.
have huge amounts of it. And you've just set out an entire minefield there. And like
Yeah.
even if we take one part of the ESG, the E, and if we take one part of the E, carbon
Hmm.
emissions, like
Hmm.
so much out there on the internet around the carbon factors, and then people, this is before people are even accessing and uploading all of this stuff into AI tools.
Yeah.
But then a lot of people are like, as you say, they're not checking it. It's coming back to them. They're using it. They're publishing it. They've
Hmm.
got no methodology. They've got no verification. They've got nothing to kind of back it up with. And those numbers are going out maybe to clients, maybe to tenders, maybe to regulators, or maybe going up
Exactly.
on their website. And
Yeah.
I mean that I think would be common enough sort of practice to be honest. So just when you
Mm.
talk about the governance piece, because I think that's kind of where we need to get to, like what should companies be thinking going forward in terms of getting some sort of strict control, strict governance around data, which they should now be looking at and considering a strategic company asset?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, you have to train your people. I'm running a lot of AI literacy sessions at the minute, AI literacy training for employees so that they can get their heads around, the do's and don'ts. And of course, you don't want to approach that from the perspective of, it's kind of the carrot and stick thing. I think once people understand, and they understand the guardrails and how to use AI safely, then it kind of creates a buzz and excitement around it. But I think first and foremost, one of the first things companies need to do is have like an AI amnesty, and ask send like an AI audit around their staff, and say, look, this is with a view to finding out, because this is actually one of the best ways of finding out what AI tools should you actually be looking at and investing in. But again, uh, so that can surface a lot of ideas and a lot of innovation, but you want to make sure that you have the enterprise version of those tools in place, so that you have data processing agreements in place, that you have vetted the vendors as well. There are prerequisites that you would require as a get-go, ISO accreditation, SOC 2, maybe cyber essentials as well. So yes, making sure that you've done adequate vendor vetting is one thing, and then carrying out that audit, and then putting in place training around governance and AI literacy as well.
And are you starting to see more and more kind of policies and procedures, corporate policies, corporate procedures as a result?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'm working quite extensively with companies at the minute, to put in place AI policies, and some of them already have AI policies, and then, they do some training and they say we need to revisit that because things have moved on, and we can see now that what we have, probably isn't adequate enough. But yeah, the governance piece is so important, with the
It,
changing role of data.
well, it is, and I think it's the volume. Look at the amount of data centers been built around the world to accommodate all of this. Like the amount of
Hmm.
data that we have now is nothing compared to what it's going to be 2 years out from now. So there's going to
Hmm.
be even more of it. And so I think it is about getting the building blocks in place now within your own organization, your own business,
Definitely.
training your staff, having those policies, having those procedures, and just, yeah, controlling it, because
Hmm.
I think the more data that's going to be coming in, the harder that's going to be to get a grasp of later on. So kind of use the
Hmm.
time now wisely to do all of that. What See, from a quality perspective, so say, right, for example, companies, right, recognize this thing as an asset. We start to look at it more strategically.
Hmm.
Um, we bring in that people aspect
Hmm.
around behavioral change,
Hmm.
governance through training, and all of that you set out there previous. Um, how should businesses, like, if you look ahead then, historically how we've been using our data pre-AI, how should businesses now be starting to look to use their data with AI? And I suppose, like, build that competitive advantage, but just kind of as a whole, how is that going to change going forward in terms of how we use it?
Hmm. Hmm. I think, you know, you have to look at data in the round along with everything else that's in the company. It's not just the data in isolation. I think this is one of the really difficult elements of AI implementation, that everything has to kind of happen at the same time, so your data, how you're using your data, and again, it's back to strategy. What are you trying to achieve? I think we can look at the whole picture of AI in a very operational way.
Mhm.
And we think of this as something that we do internally in our companies. But you have to remember that all the while, the external picture is changing. So you can rush to implement all this technology. You could have an infinite budget for technology and, have all your data in place and all the rest of it. But if the picture changes externally, then all the operational stuff that you've put in place can actually become a liability, because, if you can't win the work in the first place, then, it's kind of a moot point. But
No, definitely. I mean, that just on that commercially, I mean, the potential for this within businesses, even from an ESG perspective, getting access to all of that data very quickly, really quality, kind of rich data, the opportunity to position yourself in the market as a leader is
yeah,
incredible. But I think just from an overall wider
yeah.
perspective, commercially, this is really going to put companies that take those steps that you have set out already, properly
Hmm.
embed them in the business. I think the opportunity is they're going to put themselves in a really good stead as they kind of move forward.
Yeah. And if you're only considering the operational elements, and this is what I say to my clients, look, if you're not considering the bigger picture and the strategy and your strategic positioning going forward, there are really basically four strategic positions that you could pursue in terms of how to position yourself in an AI era. But if you're not considering the strategy and you're just looking at the operational elements, I say, look, you're playing tiddlywinks when what you should be playing is chess.
Mm.
And it's to consider just the technology element of it is to completely miss the point, because the
Yeah.
technology itself is not, I'm not going to say useless, but it's of limited use
Yeah.
if you
It's
don't
back.
have all the other aspects in place.
Yeah, and it's back to your fuel analogy as well. Previous, it all kind of it all kind of is critical. Oh, guys, we just popped another poll up on screen there as well. If you would take just a few moments and answer that. Does your organization regard ESG data as a commercial asset or as a compliance exercise? And I think that's one of the things that we've sort of started to realize with AI and ESG sort of converging, that ESG is possibly moving it. Like it is there are huge commercial drivers at the minute for ESG. Don't get me wrong, but we can see that now starting to heighten as a result of the
Mhm.
access to data that we're now going to have as a business as a result of it. So does your organization regard ESG data as a commercial asset or as a compliance exercise? Um, and oh,
I,
I
I
just
think
got
also,
that on
Liam, how
screen.
you can be using it is, for forecasting, for insights, are there particular projects that you work on? Are there particular subcontractors that you work with who have an impact on kind of the wider ESG footprint or how you perform? And I think the big thing is that, a lot of this information is coming in real time with the AI tools.
Yes, that's it.
It's not that you have to do everything retrospectively. It's if you are getting an up-to-date picture of what's happening across your projects and across your ESG activities, it allows you then, to adjust your route along the way. It's not like, going back to the car analogy, if you can imagine parking up at the garage and wanting to fill the car up with fuel, and somebody says, oh, yeah, that'll be ready in another 3 months.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's the immediacy of data
yeah,
and making sure that you have those building blocks in place that are pulling in the data in a coherent format.
yeah. No, that's it. The majority there are saying commercial as well, so that's good.
Yeah, great.
That is kind of what we would have expected. No, look, you're absolutely right about the immediacy of it, Suzanne. And again, we're seeing that already. But I mean, from a modeling perspective, historically there a lot of the data there was a lag, and so by the time you
Mhm.
found out there was an issue, um, there had been a chunk of time that had went by where you'd missed an opportunity. There was a waste, be that around waste management or in the emission, whatever it might be. There was just a lag of time before you realized there was a problem, and therefore you'd missed this chunk of time to fix it, and therefore then there
Yeah.
was a cost associated with that. So that
Mhm.
that immediacy is changing that, and also with the power of AI and feeding the good, clean, quality data into it,
Mhm.
the response times and your ability to react now are so much faster. So there's huge opportunities there for businesses as well. And modeling and looking ahead and using the historical data that we've got for previously completed projects, for example, or whatever it might be, and you're moving into like a new job, and the ability to benchmark so quickly over quite a few different, not just one siloed scenario, over multiple scenarios, and based on specific maybe factors around the value, the location, the scope, the sector, all of those different things.
Yeah.
And you're just there's a lot of power there, I think, and a lot of access to a lot of really, really unbelievable intel actually for businesses. So it does allow for speed as well, which is the
Yeah.
bit that really, if I'm honest, does excite us. It's at the NIQ because we're seeing that already. It's in its infancy, but we're seeing it already in terms of working, with customers and so on. So, no,
Yeah.
look, that's really useful, Suzanne. Sorry, I'm just really conscious of time here. Um, so I think Suzanne, just to allow for time for Q&A and so on as well there. And if we were
Yeah,
just to
sure.
kind of wrap things up, I think the number one takeaway here for me is companies need to have a mindset shift. Based on what you're saying, they should now start looking at their data as a strategic company asset.
Yeah, yeah, very
And
much so.
and then like they do with any other strategic asset in the business, they should be now looking to put those strong, robust governance structures in place to protect it
Yeah.
and control it to some extent.
Mhm.
And then you also sort of asked, I remember sitting through one of your previous conferences around the data processing agreements, just making sure that, you have those, you understand what you need to have in place. And if you don't, you need to start maybe
Mhm.
getting some of those agreements in place pretty quickly. And then around that behavioral change and not ignoring the people aspect, making sure, you've educated your staff, trained your staff. And Suzanne, that's a long term, like that's not going to be something companies can achieve overnight.
No, it's not. I think that that this is a wider organizational transformation exercise, and it's not like traditional change management, you're company A and you want to transform to be company B. Nobody knows at the minute what company B looks like, which is
Yeah,
why, the speed of change is also very important with AI
yeah,
and I mean don't necessarily rush into everything. Yes, there's an immediacy of getting on board and getting started with AI and, solving some operational issues. But, don't go too far down the route of embedding everything you do with these big end-to-end systems because, if the market shifts externally, then that actually becomes a liability. So,
that's the
so
cost.
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
It's very costly, and migrating from one platform to another would be, excruciating. So yeah,
it's,
so the pace of change is very important too.
don't rush. Basically, this needs planned out. This needs thought out. You
Yeah,
need your strategy in place. Absolutely, Suzanne.
yeah,
No, look, my big takeaway from this all is data should be considered a valuable company asset, and therefore we need strong governance structures in place to control and manage, and we need that strategy in place to take into account the people aspect as well. So thank you. Listen, it's a big topic, and
it is.
I love, I know, and it's hard to cover in 40 minutes. So I do love, though, your thought process around the role of data, and it's not something I think a lot of people are, it's not something I think a lot of people are making the connection with, that these tools are great and there's lots of them, but they're
Mhm.
hungry for data. And as a business, you need to have huge amounts of good quality, clean data to feed them in order to get out of the AI tool what you want and what you expect to get out of it.
Yeah,
And I think that looking on that now as an asset is actually a really valuable, data is like oil. Basically, we're going to be data rich as
yeah.
businesses type thing, and the richer the data, the better. So it all makes sense. It really does sort of bring it all together. So, folks, just again looking at the clock here, is there any questions? I've nothing in the chat. Feel free to drop them into chat or shout out if anyone has any questions for Suzanne here today about the role of data within AI or within the AI tools themselves. Happy enough. And if there's nothing today, and you think about afterwards, please drop us a note, and we'll definitely get back to you. Any questions after the session, we're happy to get back as well. Okay, well, Suzanne, I think we will maybe just start to wrap things up there. Just 22.
Yeah.
So, in terms of yourself. PJ, have you a slide there for Suzanne? There we go. Brilliant. Um, Suzanne, it's got, as I say, she's a founder of two businesses, AI for SMEs and also constructive intelligence. So you can scan that QR code on screen now, and that'll bring you through to your 6 dimensions of constructive intelligence. Suzanne, can you give us a wee bit more about the 6 dimensions there? What companies
Yeah.
can expect when they scan the QR code?
Yeah, so the 6 dimensions of constructive intelligence, that kind of takes you through an assessment, just to maybe I suppose, give you an idea of where you are in terms of your organizational transformation. The 6 dimensions are strategy, governance, workforce, operations, commercial, and pace. So yeah, I mean, it generates an instant report for you, and if you want to use that, maybe to just benchmark where you are with things, and maybe some of the questions will actually prompt ideas as well. Um, but I actually launched the Constructive Intelligence website yesterday. So if you're on there and you see any anomalies, don't judge me. So
Yeah,
and no
yeah, yeah.
doubt there'll be a little bit of snagging to do with the website, but it's more or less there, I think. But yeah, so hopefully you might find the assessment useful, just maybe to benchmark your own activities in terms of organizational transformation.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. Suzanne, one question just in there from Karen.
Mhm.
What is the best tip from both of us on how to make a compelling business case to the C-suite or the board to view it as a business imperative, please? Specifically meaning to the ESG, but I suppose it's that business case to the C-suite.
Mm-hmm.
Any tips?
Gosh, yeah, I know this is a it's it I suppose when I'm working with companies, I'm kind of looking at getting them into the discipline of making the business case for individual AI tools. But I mean, this is not going to, it's not going to go away. Everybody's going to need to implement AI in some shape or form in their company. Making the business case is it's a tough one. I think if you need to look at return on investment, how the external market is changing as well. Looking at external trends and getting across the fact that it's not just an internal decision that you need to be taking. There are things happening in the marketplace that there's been a couple of acquisitions there recently. ACOM with Concealy, which they spent $380 million on, buying AI that embeds into their company. So, it's not just that it speeds them up or it makes them more cost effective, it's that it changes the entire procurement process. So, because it moves everything upstream. So, in that scenario, if you were a company that was competing with ACOM, then you might find that you just can't win any tenders because they're just knocking it out of the park every time they bid for something. So, I think in making the business case to C-suite that you need to look at the trends that are happening externally. And I suppose this is one of the things that I'm helping companies to interpret is you can see these articles in the newspaper or online on the news and take them at face value, but when you start to think through the implications of it, then you actually see this is an existential threat to our business, and like the CEO of ACOM saw AI as an existential threat to their business and their 16 billion turnover and I don't know 51,000 employees. So, if a company of that size is saying this is a big threat to our business and we need to do something about it to make sure that we're strategically positioned for the future. I think that the external trends are probably the best way to make the business case.
No, look, I think so. And I think just even from an ESG perspective, Karen, Suzanne touched on it there around the commercial aspect. For me, there's obviously the compliance aspect, but even, you'll know yourself, ESG clauses are now forming part of loan agreements. So even companies looking to access finance to scale the business are now having to report against the likes of ESG investors. If there's any investors in the background, they're all doing due diligence. No one wants to invest in or for a business that's potentially damaging the environment or harming a local community anywhere. Then there's the clients, and you're looking at your customers, you're looking at what they're saying about ESG. You're really looking to align your strategy with theirs so that you can be seen to be, traveling along with them, helping them achieve their targets, be that carbon reduction or what have you. So I think the business case for having access to ESG data within a business now is it's critical. It's there. I think most people are sort of getting up to speed with that. I think looking at the trends that Suzanne said though, and the whole goal here is that non-financial reporting, your ESG performance, gets up on par with your financial reporting. So your non-financial, your ESG data is going to have to be in the not too distant future audit proof. It's going to be scrutinized exact same way as your financials are being scrutinized today. And so I think making the C-suite aware of that and that they understand that that is the direction of travel here. And the need for that data within the business is kind of critical. And then to be able to feed an AI tool so that you can satisfy all of those different stakeholders that now need access to your company performance around all of that. It's going to be essential. It's not something that's going to be able to be done on a spreadsheet. So happy to touch base with you and look at that a wee bit more after today for sure. But it's definitely the conversation that should being had within the board. Folks, we're over. So thank you so much for joining us today. Look, really, really appreciate it. There's a lot more information on sustaiниq.com, including case studies. If you want to get in touch with us, hello@sustaiниq.com as well. One of the team would be more than happy to jump on and give you guys a demo. Suzanne Hill, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Every time we speak, I learn more and more, and I keep getting little nuggets. And that fuel one is going to stay with me now. That's my new thing for explaining AI tools and data and the role of data. That's how I'm going to get that across to people. I just think it's perfect layman terms for people to get their head around. So, Suzanne, thank you again for your time today.
Thank
And look,
you.
if anyone wants to get in touch with Suzanne to find out a lot more about how she can help you in your business on your AI journey, details on screen there. And again, go to the website and you can reach out directly to Suzanne as well. So PJ will be sending all of you a recording of today and a few more resources. I think there's a return on investment calculator and different things like that that's going to come out tomorrow. We'll include more contact details for Suzanne as well. So folks, until next time, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.